Fountain Valley is a quiet suburban city in Orange County, California. Known for its family-friendly neighborhoods and master-planned community, the city has deep roots in its past. One of the earliest settlers in the Fountain Valley area was Rock Courageous.
They were Basque sheep herders, basically, and they came from France to San Francisco, I believe. And then when they came here in the 1870s, it was perfect for them because the bluffs over there on Talbert, there was constant year-round flowing streams at the bottom of the bluffs, and it made it just perfect for sheep herding. So they were one of the pioneer families, and soon after them followed the Talbert and the Wardlow families from Long Beach.
By 1899, the Talbert family had established a post office, and the area became known as the town of Talbert. The center of town was located on what is today the intersection of Talbert and Bouchard Streets. Rock's grandson, Joe Courageous, would one day marry Hazel Titus, who attended one of the first schools in the area. The two met on New Year's Eve on 1940.
I was born here in Fountain Valley. I was born October 16th, 1925, on Wright Street, which is now Brookhurst, right now where the Bank of America is at. My dad worked for Sam Talbot at one time, moving houses.
Portions of the original Courageous Ranch can still be seen on the corner of Talbert Avenue and Newland Street on the mesa known as the Bluffs. This ranch used to contain over 8,500 head of sheep owned by the Courageous family.
The original house was built in 1889. Joe's grandfather acquired some property from Stearns Rancho in 1868. The house was built, the tank house was built, those two things, and one of the wells was drilled there on the property.
Back in the early 1900s, the Santa Ana River flowed freely. There were no flood control channels at the time to contain the river. The town of Talbert and the surrounding areas were hit time and time again when the river would rise. Countless farms, homes, and businesses were destroyed by the rising waters.
This was a historic bend of the Santa Ana River, so flooding was a constant. Fountain Valley was inside this wide bend of the river, and it flowed yearly because it was yet to be channeled and contained up by Prado Dam, further up the road there. So they never really knew where the water was going to go.
The town of Talbert also had a high water table, which helped create the perfect soil for farming. Farmers wouldn't have to dig down very far before they hit water, and sometimes wouldn't have to water their crops because the roots were fed from the water below the soil. As the years moved forward, many more farmers moved to the area to benefit from the rich soil. Japanese-American families also came into the area to farm the land. Jim Cano, who would become the first mayor of Fountain Valley in later years, grew up in the area.
Well, actually, I was born across the river from Fountain Valley in an area called Greenville. I don't know if you're familiar with Greenville. I think it's part of Santa Ana now. And grew up on a farm, on an asparagus farm.
When Jim was in middle school, the family moved from Greenville to the town of Talbert.
Well, actually, we grew from 20 acres, and then we bought 40 acres on Brookhurst Street and across from City Hall, Fountain Valley. And then we were renting another 20 acres, so we had 60 acres in asparagus. And plus the home 20 acres, we start planting other things, lettuce, tomatoes, cabbage, you name it.
Kuyatoa and Sada Ishi were Japanese immigrants that came to California for the chance at the American dream.
Well, at first, my father farmed mostly vegetables, where it takes hand picking. I mean, you really have to labor, but he was fortunate to have a pretty big farm, Mr. Warlow, and so he planted asparagus, which lasts for the whole plant, you keep it for about 15 years.
Asparagus and celery were very common crops in this area, along with sugar beets, chili peppers, and fruit.
We lived here until the war started, and that's when the government told us to get out.
After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps. Many families in the town of Talbert were sent to Poston, Arizona.
I believe a surprising number of the Japanese family did come back and were able to come back and resume farming where they were. I've heard stories about other local farmers that would look after their land or their property or their machine equipment. And so a lot of them did come back.
After the war, when I came back, my father was farming yet, so he came back to his land right there.
Rosa's father rented the land he farmed for many years. It wasn't until her brothers came back to the area that the Ishis were able to buy the land they farmed.
The aliens could not own land in California, so my father just had to rent. And so when my brother became 21, they were able to buy a piece of land right here in Fountain Valley.
Charles Ishi, one of Rosa's brothers, married Kuniko after World War II.
I first arrived in Fountain Valley after my marriage to my husband. We were married in Chicago soon after he was discharged from the World War II in Europe. And I came here in January 1946.
Her husband Charles would one day become one of Fountain Valley's first city council members, and with the help of his brother, grew the Ishi brothers' farm into a very profitable venture. They employed a large group of farm workers who Charles would help out on the weekends.
We had a place for them to, live, and my husband took them to grocery shopping every Saturday on their day off, because Sunday is a work day for the farmers. So.
The Ishis farmed everything from asparagus to chili peppers, tomatoes, and much more.
Before we left the Fountain Valley, when the freeway started to come by, we were farming 300 acres altogether.
In 1944, the Lucero family was another family of farmers. They moved from Silva Beach to the town of Talbert. Frank Lucero was in the 8th grade at the time.
What attracted my dad to the area was the type of agriculture, because he was a farmer. In Silva Beach, it was field crops that he grew, primarily alfalfa, hay, those kinds of things. Here it was, he transitioned to the truck crop area, if you will, and that had to do with vegetables primarily.
The Lucero family home was located on the corner of what is now New Hope and Warner Avenue. And because of the close proximity to the air base that was located on the premises of what is now Miles Square Park, Frank had a front row seat to the comings and goings of the pilots that were training at the facility.
But they would use our large eucalyptus trees that were already 50 years old when my parents moved here as visual cues to establish their pattern. And what was exciting for us as kids is that we would watch them fly by, they'd roll to their left, they could look down to us playing in the yard. They had their canopies open and back, we could see their shoulder straps, and we'd wave to them, and we thought it was the biggest deal in the world when they would wave back.
One of the earliest communities was Colonia Juarez, located in the central part of Fountain Valley at Warner Avenue and Ward Street, which originally began as a settlement of immigrant workers and their descendants residing in the vast agricultural openness of Orange County in the 1920s. Colonia Juarez remained fairly isolated over the years, until in 1969, the housing boom in the city and assistance from Washington, D.C. and the Bureau of Housing and Urban Development resulted in a buildup of paved streets, water lines, and sewage facilities. Soon, farms made way for housing and other development during Orange County's huge post-World War II boom. The expansion of the area with the freeway and the building of neighborhoods made the farmers in this area think about how their community was going to be impacted.
The farmers were concerned that we were being pushed out of farming.
But how the city was incorporated is another story. Jim Cano explains how they got the idea for a master plan community.
I know a couple of planning people that could help you in laying out the plan for the city. They studied all this, and so I met them, and they said, yeah, there's such thing as a master plan development of a city. They have some experience in that, so the best thing to do before you do anything is to let us go look at the lay of the land, see what it looks like, and how do you picture it. And I said, well, so together, between some of the farmers and the land planners, we looked over the place and came up with our master plan of development of the city. We knew where the freeway was going through, San Diego Freeway hadn't been built yet, but they were built, starting on it.
Once the city incorporated, a city council was elected and put in place. Many of the men that were elected to the first city council were farmers that had settled in the town of Talbot and had claim to the land. Charles Ishi, Robert Wardlow, Joseph Collins, Henry Boer, and Jim Cano were the first city council members of the newly incorporated city of Fountain Valley. Jim Cano was not only the first mayor of Fountain Valley, but the first Japanese American elected as mayor in the entire United States.
Having been incarcerated and coming back to an area and election of the people there, which was Japanese or minorities, of course, to be elected as mayor of the city was, it blows my mind. So did a lot of people. U.S. News and World Report did a big story about it, and some of the other papers.
With a master plan in place, it was time for the city staff to start implementing the major projects.
When I first came to work here, that was the exciting times. Like I said, when I came to work here, there was 4,000 people. And of course, right now, there's about 56,000 or 57,000. All this development occurred in a very short time. In fact, about between I'd say 64 to about 1978, all the development came in. But the residential just went boom, 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 and the biggest scream from the developers was, what's holding up my plans, and so forth. But that was exciting years, watching the development go in, and I enjoyed it because watching the plans go in accordance with the master plans.
Fountain Valley also got a lot of attention during presidential campaigns. Presidents Ford, Reagan, and Bush all brought their campaign through Fountain Valley.
That's when Reagan came in, and the Republican Party agreed to pay for everything that cost the city anything. And so we put extra policemen on patrol. We had the SWAT team sitting on top of the building.
Once known as the town of Talbot, to the evolution of the city of Fountain Valley, this area has seen a lot of growth. But the master plan that was developed from the early farmers to the city council of today has given Fountain Valley a unique quality to all those that live here.
And let me tell you something, Fountain Valley is not a bad place to live. It's kind of corny, they're all saying a nice place to live, but it's true.
And what would Rock Courageous, one of the first pioneers of Fountain Valley, think of the community today?
Well, I think Rock would be pleased with it because he was an adventurer. He was a hardworking man. He was always looking forward to something. I think he would be pleased.